Welcome everyone. If you're just joining us for the first time, this is the workshop entitled Recovery, Intimacy, and Vulnerability with Rabbi Iggy of Shuva Center and Gary Katz. And we'll be beginning in a moment. But if in the meantime, please share your name, where you're calling in from today, and what your intentions are. What challenges or questions do you have that are bringing you into this space today? And we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear where you're coming in from. We got Nicola from Brooklyn, New York, Lori from New York City, Michael from Philadelphia, Lauren from Jacksonville, Florida, Gregory from Rockaway, New York, Desiree from New York City, Stacy from Los Angeles, all over the United States, Maro from New York City, Bennett in Brooklyn. Welcome everyone. So it's 5:04, let's get started. So welcome to this workshop entitled Recovery, Intimacy, and Vulnerability. I'm Jess Lippman. I am a mindfulness and mindset coach. I'm also founder of the Mindful Nest and co-founder of Recovery Dharma. And I'm with Shuva Center today, and I support them with putting on great programming like this workshop today to support people on the path of recovery and really from all walks of life. I'll introduce Rabbi Iggy first and the Shuva Center. So Rabbi Iggy is founder of the Shuva Center and is a renowned Talmud teacher, spiritual counselor, artist, and educator. He grew up between Belgium, Israel, and the United States in a traditional Jewish Orthodox home. He is a frequent author, speaker, teacher, and contributor on subjects ranging from Talmud, Jewish text, spirituality, addiction, recovery, fatherhood, and LGBTQI+ issues. Shuva Center is a residential Jewish recovery home and community for addicts of all kinds. We believe recovery belongs to everyone, addicts and non-addicts alike, and we integrate Jewish wisdom, text, and ritual, psychotherapy, the 12 steps, and spirituality to help those suffering find a path to recovery regardless of their faith. And we are so excited to have Gary Katz here today. Gary is a licensed clinical social worker with a private practice, the Center for Intimacy Recovery in New York City, where he works with individuals, couples, and groups. His primary focus is on relationships, attachment, and intimacy, and our ability to present with ourselves and with others and address the different ways we use to avoid doing that despite craving it. In his practice, he works with individuals, couples, and groups in many areas, but with a focus on trauma and attachment, intimacy, love and sex addiction, alcohol and chemical addiction, male survivors of sexual abuse, and more. So with that, I'll just say before we begin, if you have any questions, please drop them into the chat so that Rabbi Iggy and Gary can answer them throughout the discussion and especially toward the end of the discussion. So they'll get to as many questions as time permits today. So any questions, insights, feedback, make sure to drop those in. They'll also be sharing some polls throughout this workshop. So when prompted, you can respond to the poll and see the results. So I encourage you to participate in that as well. If you haven't yet already, please drop into the chat. Let us know your name, where you're coming in from today, and what your intentions are today. What are you bringing into this space today? What called you in, if it was curiosity or a challenge happening in your life or a question that's been pulling to you. And I believe that's all I've got. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Iggy and Gary Katz for this workshop.
Thank you, Jess, for this great introduction. Let me just for the technology, right? Let me. Oh, there we go. We can depanel everybody. Yaniv, am I depaneling you, or are you depaneling yourself? We'll do that. Sorry. There you go. You and me. Hi, Gary. Thank you for doing this, right? For everybody, thank you for joining us. As Jess was talking about everything, it made me think about really why we're doing this and why sort of like I wanted to do it with Gary. A lot of people was like asking like, hey, how do you know Gary? And I keep saying that Gary and I belong to this really mini group that we met called the Spiritual Ninjas. Right? Sort of like, right? That's how we met. But I'm really fascinated by what we're about to talk about today and sort of like the insights of that, which is really the relationship between connection and intimacy, but also sort of codependency and how all that through the lens of recovery, both in terms of sort of addiction recovery, of course, which is sort of like at the crux of a lot of at least what we do and what you do as well, but also in terms of recovery, right? Because as we all know, Rob, you don't have to be an addict in recovery, right? So the sort of recovery has lessons for all of us, no matter where we are. So in that sense, I think this conversation is very sort of like important to me, both on a personal and a professional level. Um, I guess we should start. The first sort of like question is sort of like, um, how do you see connection? Um, I don't know what happened. How do you see intimacy and connection? And why is it important, right? So like why are we even talking about this?
Yeah. Well, I just want to say I'm happy to be here with you, Iggy. And I feel that even though we're on this electronic screen, this technical thing, that we can all have intimacy, not just you and I, but just to take a moment for all of us to just to feel the connection in whatever way that feels for all of us, whether it's you and I here on the screen or all the people who are here, but just whether it's looking through the chat and noticing all the different places or just feeling everybody's intention, whether they said it or not, just for just a moment to feel that. And I have to say, it feels very intimate. This feels very intimate to me. And there's two reasons. There's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of beautiful people. Some I know, some you know, some we don't know, but just hearing them, seeing them check in, or just trying to feel and connect to them. But also just what happened during Jess's brief intro. Like, I'll just share what happened to me. She shared, when I think it was Sean shared he was in Oregon, she said she was in Oregon too. I grew up right across the river from where Jess is right now. That's like a big part of my childhood, and I connected to that. And having her read your or describe your bio and coming from the route that you took is a similar route that I took, and that cracks my heart wide open, which is I think why we've connected so well always. And so, you know, I only, like, for me, that's what intimacy is. It's being able to know what's going on with me, myself, hopefully at any given moment, or maybe sometimes for some of us and myself, I'm one of those people, I have a time delay. So like today I'll be like, oh yeah, that's what I felt yesterday. I don't always know at the moment, but intimacy for me means first being able to be intimate with myself, to be able to look inside myself and understand all the parts of myself. And I don't like them all. I don't think any of us do. So not just the parts that we put out like on a date or when we meet someone new or on social media that we want are shiny and we want everyone to see, but also the parts of ourselves that we don't like, or that we also kind of like want to avert our gaze and not really pay attention to because they make us uncomfortable. Maybe we feel ashamed of them. Attitudes, you know, like, or actions that we've had or history that we've had. So being able, for a person to be able to first be in touch with all those different parts, only after I do that can I let you see that. I'm not gonna, if I can't look at all my parts, there's no way I'm gonna let anyone else do. So the only way I can achieve intimacy, which means to show myself, like into me see, as they say, right? It's so cliche, but it's so true. I have to first be able to see into me and feel safe doing so. So, and then if I can do that, I can let you see into me too, and hopefully you'll let me see into you.
I love that, right? So like I love that for a lot of different reasons, right? Um, One is much like the work in recovery, right? the sort of that it has to start with me, right? It always has to start with me and taking action, right? I need to be able to willing, right, to look in this mirror and say like, oh, here are the things that I don't really like, right? And in that sense, the only way to sort of like start discussion about intimacy is to find not the places where I feel the best with myself, but maybe the places that I feel not so good with myself, right?
It takes a lot of courage.
Right. And you
It
have, so
takes,
you have to be vulnerable. What I'm hearing is, and I think I agree, right? Like you have to be vulnerable to be intimate,
yeah,
right?
yeah. A couple, actually, it was last summer. I applied online to this program, Freestyle Love Supreme, to learn how to freestyle rap, and I played. They had like a cute, cool, much cooler than me questionnaire, and one of the things they said was, "What's the scariest thing you've ever done?" And I went through my head like, what, I've done a lot of crazy, dumb, and scary things, but what I came out with was allowing myself to be seen completely, honestly. That's the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. And I haven't always done it, and I don't always do it well. But to allow another human to be able to see all of me and take that risk that maybe they won't want to be with me, or they
Right.
won't like me, or they'll reject me.
That's part of the human condition, right? Right. I think I don't know a single person who doesn't feel like that, right? I don't know a single person who says, who doesn't walk into a room like, will they like me? Will I be cool enough?
Yeah,
Right? Will I be enough? Like, no, like I don't know a single person. And I know a lot of people who you would think, as I'm sure you do, like who have it all, right? Who have fame and riches and a lot of different things, but uh, but it would be very uh, I don't know a single person who I mean it would be very difficult to find anybody who doesn't feel like do I belong, right? Do I
right,
feel good? Like, all these elements.
right. And that comes, the baby who's, we're born as beautiful little babies. We're not thinking like, I hope the nurse likes me. We're not thinking that. Like, I hope that I look as cool as the other babies. Like, we're not insecure, but it usually arises from life. We all get dinged, and our hearts are fragile and they're precious, and we all get dinged and banged up as we go through life, intentionally, unintentionally, whatever form. And what you said earlier, I just connects to this, Iggy, which is that you're talking about recovery starts with me, and I have to be intimate with myself. And just that word recovery, like recovery from what? Like recover, it's recovering me.
Right.
I'm recovering myself. And that's what I love also about the word, which is the name of your center, the Tshuva Center in Hebrew. Tshuva means repentant. We translate as repentance, but it really means recovery,
Right.
return to me, return to my wholeness, that I'm a perfectly imperfect human being.
Right. No, for sure. Right. Right. Tshuva means right repentance, response, and return. And right, and that's it's return to the self. Right. I like this. Right. So the perfectly imperfect, because I think right fundamentally uh, that the again one of the first sort of like pieces of acquired sort of like maybe knowledge or new knowledge or affirmation for some is that no one is perfect, and it's only when I try to only be perfect that I fail.
Right.
Right? The sort of right, the sort of intimacy has to start from a place that says there's something in our shared experience that we would relate to because both of us have failed, both of us feel like shit, both of us
Right.
feel that we don't matter, both of us have been rejected, and so forth and so on.
Right. And that's the power of, that's why recovery is so powerful, because what is recovery? It started with one person sharing their failures and their experience and strength and hope with another, with Bill and Bob, right? Two people, and it's repeated every day in millions of ways. But it's not like lecturing. I'm not going to tell you what to do. It's
Right,
sharing through mutual trials and tribulation and wounds and hurts. That's how we arrive at being okay with that.
right, right. So here, right, so that we're all going through this pandemic, right? We're all going through COVID-19 and right, and uh, unfortunately, right, so like this pandemic is not just killing people and sort of like really deadly, but also, of course, right, so like produces a lot of isolation, right? We have to stay in apartments. we can't go out, we can't be, we can't be physically friends, we can't be physically next to each other, right? So like, so do you feel, and I think why we even have a poll for people, right? Do you feel that that this confine, this sort of new state that we're in, is challenging us even more, our intimacy, our
Yes. I'm
relationships?
like that guy. I'm like that guy in the meme at the beginning of the pandemic about when like your wife is like, yes, like, yes, I feel our pandemic is challenging us even more. It
Right,
challenges in every way. It's a traumatic event, right? If you look at a list of traumatic symptoms, things like depression, anxiety,
right,
lack of sleep, hypervigilance, irritability, intrusive thoughts, feeling low, the pull for escape through substances, the pull through escape through other things, feeling numb, feeling loss of worth, suicidal thought. All those are symptoms of trauma.
right.
And so trauma is often known not by the memory. And I just wanted to touch this for a second. It's not always, you don't always know trauma because you remember it. Oh, I remember in third grade, this and this happened to me. That's one way you sometimes have no trauma, but we usually know trauma not through our cerebral or like what we call explicit memory. I can remember, and I was in Vancouver, Washington in third grade, but it's a felt memory. We call it an implicit memory. And that's why with intimacy, it's not just knowing all of our history, although it's really interesting how so many people can't remember their childhoods, especially with traumatic experiences. But our emotional memory is what we have to learn how to get intimate with. Because, when you and I get in a fight, right, or when you get in a fight with a loved one, you're not responding cerebrally usually. We respond from an emotional place, our emotional memory. And so the intimacy includes that too. And that's really where the work is, because that emotional response is the thing that leads us to addiction, depression, and stuff like that. So the pandemic that we're in right now, we're maybe in comfortable homes, hopefully, well decorated if you took the time beforehand. But like illness and death are at the doorstep. And we're being careful and hopefully safe and God willing, but like that's what a pandemic is. And then there's being told where you can go and where you can't go, which, that's not an easy thing. I don't like being told what to do.
Right.
There's economic.
Neither
What?
do I.
Yeah, like you're not the boss of me is probably what they'll put on my tombstone.
Yeah.
But there's economic insecurity, political unrest, disparity, all these things that are happening in the world, and they're constant. We have them every day. And someone told me such a great comparison. It's like with our phones, if you have apps open on your phone, it drains the battery.
Right.
Even if you're not using the app. And so you have to close all the apps so the battery doesn't get drained. And all these things that are happening right now in our lives in this crazy situation that we're all in, they're draining our emotional batteries. So it's a traumatic event. And if you are experiencing any of those things I said or any other symptoms, that's how you know you're going through trauma. So now when you take all that's going on with you and you turn to the person in your living room, or that you're holed up in a small apartment in New York City or in a large house somewhere else, wherever you might be, it's got to have an impact on how you relate to someone else, whether you're living with them or you're like talking like this or connecting electronically. It has to impact.
So it's funny. It sounds, because right, it sounds like that when I'm experiencing the trauma, right, it's not a memory, but like every trauma brings out every other trauma.
Yeah.
Right? Every time I have a fight every time I have a fight, it brings up every other fight that I've ever had.
Every time she tells me I forgot to take out the garbage, it reminds me of every other time she told me I forgot to take out the garbage.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
That's
Or
right.
every time you have grief and you have loss in your life, it opens up the well of grief and loss from earlier times. So that's part of what whether recovery work, therapy work, and the intimacy piece is knowing when I'm having this emotional reaction right now. Am I reacting to being told to take out the garbage right now? Or am I reacting to the thousands of times before? If I'm, I just had this an hour ago in a therapy group we were running. Someone processed out, meaning they've been in group for a couple of years. they were leaving. Everyone in the group has had experience of being left. So we talked about like their emotional reactions of seeing this man they've shared so much time with leaving. How much is right now about him leaving, but how much is evoking their history of other times they've been left, you know, or have had other loss. And it's hard to tease that out sometimes.
It's very hard, right? Because at the moment the emotional feels very real, right?
Yes.
At the moment it feels very real. At the moment it feels like, you know, you're asking me to take out the trash, but what I'm feeling is, you know, you don't respect me, you don't love me, you don't
You give me
understand
the
me.
garbage jobs.
Exactly, right? Like, right, I get all the garbage jobs, I am garbage, that's all I'm good for. And at the moment it feels very real, right? It
Yeah.
feels very, and it's hard to sort of like, in that moment, say to myself, uh, all she's asking, Iggy, is for you to take the trash. Nothing else, nothing more.
Right. And the classic case of that is a veteran of war
Right,
who's walking down the street and a car backfires and he hits the cement, right? His emotional reaction is not to the car.
right,
He's living still back when he was, you know, in service.
right,
And so what the work to do and with that kind of PTSD or other relational trauma is to learn, when am I reacting at the moment and when am I not? And it takes a lot of practice. Let's, you know, it's like, and then you build up what I would, in recovery, I would call it sober reference.
right,
And here I would call it some other kind of reference. So like the first time sober, you walk in, you know, you're at a family dinner and they're drinking and you don't drink. You survived. You didn't drink. Now you know the next time and the next time, the same thing. Oh, I had the garbage conversation. I felt this whoosh of indignation and defensiveness and all that stuff. And I respond like a jerk. The next
right,
time you do some work and the next time I feel the whoosh and I'm like, maybe they're not totally telling me I'm garbage. Maybe that's my
right,
garbage, you know?
right. It's funny, I don't know how you feel this, but I sometimes I feel, right, that every argument between partners in that sense, every single argument can be boiled down to one of two statements. Everything one. You don't love me enough, or you don't love me the way I want to be loved. That no matter what the argument is, from cabinetry to trash to how to raise the children, that every argument can be boiled down to one of these two statements
You guys are making cabinets?
all the time.
Oh, all right. Well, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's true. I'd have to think about it more, but I definitely know those are active. That's what, it's not the garbage. It's never the garbage, right? It's never the cabinetry. I do like the cabinets behind you though, but it's the feelings that are evoked, and usually they're historical, especially a big reaction that causes a fight.
Right.
Right. And that's why in recovery, you're going to do the step work, right? Hopefully that digs out the patterns of resentment or hurt, like where was I wrong? What did I feel? And you start to see these patterns, or in therapy, maybe in a different way through and looking at it from a relational trauma perspective.
Right. So there's a question which actually leads into where I wanted to go myself, right? From just saying, like, for dismissive avoidants who feel the impulse or gut feeling to exit a relationship, right? So like we all have that, a lot of us, right? Even if the components of the relationships are aligned, what do you recommend they do? How can they detect if if it's related to fear or vulnerability, and if it is, what do you advise? Like, right? So moving to to intimacy, how then do we, right? How do we fix, or not fix, but how do we address that? But how do you address, we don't all have that. I was in one for 9 years. A lot of us, sorry,
Right.
not right. Um, um,
It's the same answer for however the question was worded, right? It's the same answer for however we are. It's about, because it starts, you know, the work starts with me. Like they say in Al-Anon, right? Change starts with me, not by fixing the other person. So I have to really know myself. And it sounded like the person who wrote that question knows, you know, I just want to clarify what some of those things meant in case other people don't, you know. So there's this concept of attachment style, which I'm sure a number of people here are familiar with, but I want to explain it. So the way we develop our sense of worth as humans starts when the way our caretakers, when we're little, look at us or just interact with us. You know, if you ever like lean over a baby and you look down at it, its eyes come alive. It lights up, because that gives it a sense of being seen, and that being seen gives it a sense of worth. And that really is what we're trying our whole lives. I would say that's similar to what you said before. You don't love the right way. We want to be seen. So the baby wants to just be seen and, cooed at. The terrible 2 kid wants to be seen, so they individuate. The teenager goes goth or whatever type of not regular way they are to individuate and be seen. And as adults in romantic relationships, we want to be seen and we just felt and heard from our partners. At work, who doesn't want their boss to see how they're working? All through life, that's what we want, is to be seen. And so the way we're seen and experienced as a child is directly connected to how we feel seen as an adult. And so if the person taking care of me is consistent, I wouldn't say perfect, because I don't know any parent is perfect, but if they're consistently present and calm, they then calm our nervous system and they give us a sense of worth. If they're back and forth, they're in and out or full of anxiety, then that affects my nervous system as a baby, and also teaches me I can't really rely on them. And then if I really feel hurt as a little baby because they're not consistent enough, I might become dismissive, which is I think what this person, the term they used, which means I might minimize and create distance. They're all ways that we relate, and then as adults, that's what we do too. I think what the crux of this question is how do I know if it's my stuff or their stuff? Is the relationship wrong or right? Or is it my stuff and I have to work through? And that's why intimacy starts with me. I have to first know myself. And it takes time in a relationship with another person where everything happens live and they have their own stuff and I have my own stuff, and then we have our dynamics, that our stuff creates dynamics to tease out, does this feel right and true or not? Is this my stuff? Am I upset about the old garbage or the current garbage?
So if all we want to be seen, which I agree, why don't we hide so much? Right?
Because it's scary.
It's
scary. I remember sitting at a Jack's retreat. Jack's is an organization for Jewish alcoholics and chemically dependent others, and they're significant. I can't even say that.
Oh, you're much better than I. Took me a really long time to remember.
Yeah, it's a recovery. It started in the 80s when that Jews didn't drink or Jews didn't do drugs, whatever.
No, of course, Jews don't drink. Jews don't do drugs. Jews don't beat their wives.
Right.
Jews don't have AIDS. Jews are not in prison. Right? Jews are not in prison. Yeah.
Right. So it was a breakthrough thing in the 80s at that time, and really served the Jewish population well. And they have these really beautiful retreats. And I remember sitting in a circle at a meeting late Friday, Shabbat night, and this woman said, all I want to do is connect with people, and all I do is push them away. And she went like this. And that, I don't know if I can't see, I hope you guys can see, but yeah. It's one hand pushing and one hand pulling. So it's human nature. We're born with the desire to connect as humans, but because we have some experiences at different points in life, it might be our parents or caregivers, it might be those mean girls in middle school, it might be the guys who picked on us when we were in high school, whatever it is, closeness is not an easy ride. It's bumpy, and our hearts, we arrive at adulthood with cuts and nicks and scars and scar tissue on our hearts. So and it's amazing to me sitting in a group with clients who've all done all these things to avoid getting close, and all they want is to get close.
Right.
It's all people want. And so we may not want it, and we may avoid it in behavior, but I believe at our core, it's what each one of us craves, is to feel seen and to connect. But it's like I said, for me, it's the most terrifying thing I've ever done in my life.
So, right. So, okay. So we connect. What's too close? Right. So right. Yo, Rabbi, you keep telling me to connect, and now I'm connected to this person, right? So I'm super connected, super intimate, super thing. Is there, right? Right. That is a symptom of codependency, which is the other side of the coin of addiction. Yes, exactly. Right. What's too close, right? Because part part
It's
of
like
the
that Seinfeld episode,
right,
right? With the close talker, right?
right,
Elaine's boyfriend, Aaron, who would walk up and stand like this, and and it was like, we grow up based on our family with certain level of closeness, and every family is different, right? You can have some families, and it could be based on the familial dynamic. It could be the culture, right? If you go sit, I don't want to stereotype, but if you go sit at, let's say, a house like the classic British home,
right,
stiff upper lip, and everyone's proper,
right,
and they're not really talking like emotional. And then
right,
you go down a little further south and over, let's say to Italy or
right,
Spain, and it's like everything's heart, and they're talking. So cultures have different levels of closeness and openness too, but all those things go into, when we grow up, we're just like we're used to how comfortable it feels when someone talks to us closely or not, like that guy in Seinfeld. We have the same thing with intimacy. So if I grow up with intimacy and closeness in my home at this distance, and then I meet someone and we're dating, and they're like this doesn't feel good to me. I want it. I'll even say I want it. I'll even read books about it. I'll even tell them I want it. But my nervous system is getting activated, and I have to do something to pull away. That might be criticize them, not like, minimize them,
right.
disqualify them. It might be addiction that creates distance. It might be, let me see something or someone on the side, and instead of putting all 12 of my eggs in this basket, I'll put 8 here, but the rest will be somewhere else, and now I feel safe. It could be I'll be at work all the time. So part of close and too close is based on how we grow up. But I also think what your question was trying to get to in that comment, I can't see the comments so well from here because
Oh,
51-year-old eyes, but um, closeness also depends on being able to be close and intimate without losing myself.
right,
And that's the thing I think that you were reaching. Like, how do I get close? If I'm in a relationship, whether romantic, family, friendships, I want to get close and have this like interdependence and co-regulation where we boost each other up. We can rely on each other. We have each other's backs. They're my person, but yet I can't lose myself. And that's the line we want to try to find.
So when you say losing yourself, do we mean, let's say, codependency? Do we mean
Well, yeah. So I guess, yeah, that's one of the definitions of codependency is when I lose the ability to be autonomous to myself, and for a variety of reasons. And so instead I abandon myself in a sense. So I'll give an example. Years ago, I was in a relationship, and we lived down in Florida for a year while I was waiting to find out about graduate school, which brought me to New York. She hated Florida. I think I shared this once before. She hated Florida. So I hated Florida. It's too humid. New York's much cooler. I'd never lived in New York, all that stuff. We moved up to New
all
York.
this is true, by the way?
We moved up to New York. A number of years later, the relationship was done. I had to go down to Florida. I was like, I like Florida.
I actually like Florida, yeah.
Yeah, I like water. I like the ocean. I like manatees, So to me was an abandonment of myself. Now it wasn't that I sat there and thought, and it happens in, I think, a couple of ways. Two of the ways are, if I don't know myself, which I think was the case there, then I'm just going to take on the thing the other person says, which is why intimacy starts with myself. If I don't know what I really like, the classic case of that is many men who aren't taught to be emotionally literate, right? So their emotional vocabulary consists of fine, good, okay, or whatever you want.
Or hate and stupid.
Right, or stupid, right.
Stupid,
and their emotional responses are either not response, I'll do whatever you want, or build up of anger. Because all those times when they think they don't care, they really do care. So it's either I'll abandon myself because I don't know myself, or it's abandoning myself because it's too scary. And I think if I speak up, you'll abandon me.
Right.
So I'm going to do everything I can to hold on to you because I don't have worth. My worth comes from you.
Right.
from
So
you.
which is right, which is part of what we're teaching, right? That no matter what it is, no matter who it is, what it is, if the worth of the self, if your worth comes from anywhere other than you, it's not real worth. That is, you will always falter. If
It's
you
external.
right, exactly. If you depend on somebody else or something else, right? I often say that the most toxic sentence in the English language is, I'll be happy when, right? I'll be happy when I get the car, when I get married, when I have my child, when the child has the bar mitzvah, when I get the promotion, whatever it is, when I get a boyfriend, girlfriend, right? As soon as you say that sentence, you've lost the battle,
Right.
right? So in that sense, the worth, right, is it, right? So,
That's the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, right? Like any love which is dependent upon something, if you
right.
take the something away, the love is gone. And we think about that like, if they have money, if I love them because of the money, then they lose their money, I don't love them. But it's also like this about relationships. Like if I love them because they love me, then when that love of me is gone, I have no love of myself.
Right. So what you said, like, what are the other definitions of codependency, right? And the reason I'm sort of like going into this because I find that fascinating thing, right? Between, right, I don't mind sharing with everybody, right? My pet name for this session as we're working towards it was coda connection, right? Sort of like, right, what's in that space, in that hyphen between connection and our willing and our need, right, to be seen, to be heard, to connect to somebody, to feel seen and heard, right, which is really very powerful, right?
Right.
And but also the thin line that one can cross, right, which is that, but then all my worth comes from you, or I don't want to do anything without you, or that your happiness affects my happiness in such a way that is problematic, right? So what are
I think,
other
yeah.
things you think are sort of the codependency, or at least things to start looking at?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I actually think that codependency is one of the hardest things to work on and to deal with. You know, it's also harder to see. It's so subtle. It's easy to see if I shouldn't have a drink. It's easy to see when I'm having a drink.
Right.
It's easy to see if I shouldn't be engaged in this relationship or eating this food that I shouldn't, right? But codependency is more subtle than anything else. In fact, one of my supervisors used to always say, if you take an addict and scratch them deep enough, you'll find a codependent underneath.
That's right. That's right. I agree with that 100%. I mean, I know it's such a cliche, but like, right, addictions are like onions, like sort of like, right.
I've heard
But I
that.
do think, right, I do think that there are core addictions, and I think there are auxiliary addictions. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of the time, once you deal with a lot of the auxiliary addictions, right, although they might not seem auxiliary, but like heroin or right or alcohol, many times, not always, but many times you'll find at the core an untreated,
Right.
right, like
I would disagree with you. Yeah, I would say every time.
sorry.
I would say every time underneath this code is, we'll talk about, I want to get back to your questions in a second about how people define codependency, but addiction, whatever type of addiction, substance abuse, sex, love, food, work, exercise, other people, whatever the addiction is, it doesn't matter. It's a form of abandonment of self, right? I'm abandoning what my healthy needs are, and usually for good reasons,
Right.
right? Like nobody that little baby in the hospital ward didn't like cry and say, when I grow up, I want to be an addict. Yeah.
Oh, right. Addiction is
So,
a solution to a problem, always.
right. So it's, what in one of the 12-step programs, they say that what started out as the solution became the problem.
Right.
So for most people, and that's how we look at it at the Center for Intimacy Recovery, is that most addictions or other coping mechanisms were solutions to something else, which is the thing you really want to get to treat. But then, just like most medication commercials on TV say, but side effects include da 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 da, and like, so the same thing with most coping mechanisms. Like another teacher of mine would say that what starts out as adaptive becomes maladaptive. So it helps me at some point, and then it doesn't. And so the codependency, since we said it, like it's the abandoning of self, that's why it's always under addiction. And so you're right, we see it all the time, just like you do. And people get sober from substances or sex or love or other things. And if they don't treat the codependency stuff, I would call like the Al-Anon codependency stuff. That's why people like are sober for a long time but are miserable, or with long-term sobriety keep getting tripped up. It's usually 80% of the time either unresolved trauma or this stuff, not like losing oneself. So what happens is that, and I was, it's men or women, but men are trained socially to do this in most places, what somebody calls like subjugation, meaning I swallow my words. So the example, we gave before of like, honey, I really don't want to, like, what, you want to go to your mother's for the weekend for the 4th weekend in a row? I don't know why I always pick that example. I have to like think back in my life, but that's the one that always, I don't know. So the guy's like, fine, I'll just watch football. What?
We can talk about that later.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And so the average guy says, fine, no problem, right? And, but deep down he's upset. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. It could be like, he's really wanting pizza for dinner and she wants to go to a nice restaurant for dinner. And he's like, okay, no, fine, no problem. But deep down, he's not letting it go. He might think he's letting it go, but it's stuffing. And it's a million, he or she, we stuff it a million, like again, like I call it like a micro stuff, like again and again and again, and it builds up and it has to go somewhere. So for many people, let's say especially for men, that it turns into, for everyone, it turns into resentment, usually towards the person. And if a person can process the resentment, they can like get out of that. But then the resentment then goes one level deeper to entitlement. I deserve, because of this resentment, I deserve to eat all this. I deserve to go step outside the relationship because she's making me see her mother again or whatever, or she doesn't want pizza, or I deserve to stay at work late because he doesn't treat me nice when I'm home. And so all these, I deserve to talk this way to the person because of the way they treated me. So for many people, it has to come out. Then it has to come out somewhere. We can't just carry it. And so for men in particular, because of the two, emotions that most men are allowed to show from the time they're in like 3rd grade up, either anger, it comes out as and I'm sure that plenty of people here have either experienced this themselves or been on the receiving end, a disproportionate explosion of anger that's disproportionate to what's happening in the here and now. And their partner's like, where did that come from? It's all that buildup. Or the other emotion that men are allowed to show is sexual desire. And so with all that stuffing of those feelings over weeks or years or within one day, for men come out that way. For women, they can come out those way, in the same ways, or they can come out in other ways too. But that's why it's so important to learn that, to treat the codependency under the addiction stuff. I can't get to that stuff if I'm busy shooting up, the surface level behaviors, shooting up. If I'm busy getting high, I'm drinking, I'm stuffing my face, I'm like chasing everything that walks. I can't deal with this stuff. I'm not even in touch with these feelings. That's why we have to stop the behavior first. And only after we stop this cycle of addiction, like behavior, shame, etc., can I deal with this. But yeah, they're the same. I think I don't want to say I disagree with you. I think you're more right than you give yourself credit for it.
So how do I know, right? How do I know if me calling my mother every day, or me just like wanting my girlfriend to be happy or my boyfriend to be, how do I know if this is just me being a good son, good boyfriend, whatever, good brother, or am I being codependent? How do I, what do I need to look for?
Well, if you want to know if you're being a good boyfriend or husband or spouse, you should just ask your mom when you call her. She'll tell you. That's one way you can.
No, she will, right? My family, I don't like, right, this that old, I don't know, people know that old joke about the mother-in-law, this mother-in-law, and she gives her son 2 shirts for like, Rosh Hashanah, whatever, or holiday, and Passover comes along and he's, wearing one of the shirts to show that he really likes the shirts, and she walks in the house, she sees him wearing the shirt, and she looks at him and she says like, what, you didn't like the other one?
Right. Oh, it disappeared.
Yeah, my video camera just like went away.
Yeah.
So that's my family. But because it's funny, you said before about Italy and England, and then you get to Belgium, which is where I grew up, right? And then you get the prim and a proper table, right? Everybody's prim and a proper table, but they talk in the same way that Italians talk about emotions and share, but it's all right there. So it's, you say the most horrible things or the most thing, but it's all under coat and tie, right? So right, it's very clear and very harsh, but it's very thing. I don't know if
That's very
anybody
interesting.
have you seen Stiesel, by the way? So right, that's how I grew up. That's my family,
Yeah.
right? And if you've seen all the
In Antwerp.
where the Belgian family, so like the storyline comes in, that's my family.
Okay.
So right, so but back to the thing, right? So how do I know? What do I need to look for? Because I think for me, and I think for a lot of our clients, I'm sure yours too, that is a real question. Like, right, what is real connection, and what does it become maladaptive, right?
Right. Are you being true to yourself? I think. Am I being true to myself? And there's so many, like, on the gamut, right? There's a range. So you get the person who's like, we all know people like this, like, I have to be true to myself and I have to tell you every single thing I feel, and like that's not relational. That's just self-absorbed. And harsh, probably, right? And the other extreme is like, I never tell you what I think or what I need, and that's not being relational either, even though I always do what you want, and then because it's really to serve myself, because I'm scared, I'm not really interacting. So it's very nuanced. That's why I say it's the hardest part, I think, of recovery or self-growth, is learning this piece, because it's constantly asking yourself, like, am I being true? Like, you have to sit with yourself. You have to go slow. You have to check in constantly and be like, does this feel right for me? Does this not? And love and relationships, whatever type of relationships, are about all different interactions that are, sometimes you compromise. Can I compromise without abandoning myself? Right? So I'll go to your mom's house again for the fourth weekend, and I'm not abandoning myself. That could be a true statement. Or I feel like, you know what, I've gone 3 weekends in a row. I really just want to veg out. Hey, this doesn't feel so great to me to go again. I'd like to stay home. How is that for you?
It's interesting you say compromise, because I was just reading not too long ago, and I think that's true. I have to do a little bit more research. Maybe somebody on the listen knows it. But I'm reading something that when they were doing some peace talks between Russia and America years ago, right? So that in Russian there's no word for compromise.
Really?
Apparently, I'm not exactly sure. I just read it, but I'm not
That's
sure.
funny. Yeah.
But it's interesting, because I say this because I often feel people think that compromise, especially in the U.S., is a bad thing, as opposed to, for example, in the Commonwealth, where compromise is a positive attribute.
Right.
That here people see compromise as something that is less than the top of, right? And I wonder that, especially in terms of what we're talking about, of how do I know what is it? How do I know what is the compromise? And also, right, you said, like, we were talking about this in the prep, right? So like, I'm a parent, right? So like, right, the idiom is, right, you're only as happy as your least happy child, right? And I'm like, really? I mean, like, I'm sorry, but like, that means I'll always be unhappy, right? So like, because if I'm dependent on somebody else's happiness, how could I ever have my own happiness?
Right. Well, that goes back to what I said before. Exactly. So, and especially with romantic couples or parent-child, right? So a young child and a parent, the parent co-regulates the child, right? So the parents calm and the child gets upset. They hold the child's body relaxes, their nervous system relaxes. We do the same thing with our partners, right? Or our older children, like as children get older, we do it with them too. But certainly in a friends sometimes, but also in a romantic love relationship, I need a hug, or come here, let me hold you. What does that do? It they regulate our nervous system and they help us. And so a romantic, loving relationship, the people co-regulate each other. It's like its own biosphere. And their biosphere is also like parent-child, sibling, like there's all these, but this one, which is so close. So when this person who regulates you is off kilter, it's gonna affect you. It doesn't have to mean you're codependent. If your spouse or your partner is upset at you, or just forget, they're just upset. They had a bad day at work and they're like stomping around the house, or they're withdrawn or something like that, and they're like in their head, or it's you have to be human. You're gonna be affected. I don't know anybody who wouldn't be affected, but you don't have to lose yourself, right? So if your partner comes home from work and had a terrible day and they're withdrawn, do you immediately go to like, like they're leaving me? I need to like, I have work to do, but I'm gonna ignore my work because I'm gonna just totally cater to them even though they don't want it, but I'm gonna make sure they want it. So then, because if they do, and if I'm needed, if I'm the best boyfriend or girlfriend ever, then they'll love me and then I have worth. That would be abandoning yourself. But if it's like, hey honey, what's going on? I'm here, let's talk. Can I help you? That's not abandoning yourself. That's being present. And
Right.
so it gets confusing, because when, like you said, parent-child, that example you gave, of course it's hard when our kids struggle, right? When my kids struggle, it breaks my heart. I'm like, but the question is, do I lose myself in it?
Right.
The parent who came when I was teaching at a Jewish school on the Upper East Side, and the parent who came to the talent show night and stuffed the ballot box so their little princess would win, they've lost themselves, in that love for their child.
There's a great question here. How do you get from Marta, and then Hugh agrees with the question. I agree also, there's a third, that is a great question. How do you get true intimacy when you operate on an intellectual level to avoid getting hurt? Vulnerability.
Oh man, that's what my whole business is built on primarily. Right?
Hire Gary Katz, Marta, that's the answer.
No, that's not what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
But being intellectual is often also a defense from feeling, right? And so sometimes it's cultural. That's why when I get rabbis, no offense, but rabbis in the session, they're all up here, right? From years of learning Gemara and stuff, Talmud. And so to get them to come from here to here is really hard. And so there's certain cultures that are like that, or being a therapist for other therapists. Also, they're all up here. But for some people, it's culturally or familial, but for many people, it's a defense. Because when I'm up here, I'm not feeling here. And so when people start lawyering up, I don't mean hiring a lawyer, but becoming the lawyer,
right.
It's usually from here. They're making all these legal arguments. They're no longer being present and feeling. And that's like, if a couple in my room is arguing with each other and they're like, I call it litigating.
Right.
We're not doing that because you're not feeling yet. First of all, you're not listening probably, but you're also not feeling whatever's going on. This is where the hurt is. And this is where the healing starts, right here, not up here. So it's a great question. I'll fourth it since there were 3 people before. And the work is to slowly get out of your head and get into your body. And it can be from a variety of things. I know like you guys do hear a lot of mindfulness and other stuff. Whatever we want to label it, it's about that. Your feelings are in your body, they're not in your head.
Right. And I would add one of the things, because I'm one of those people.
So am I.
I'm one of those people that, right? So and for all sorts of different reasons, right? So like I hid behind my mind, because if I shared my heart, right, at a younger age, I didn't know it at the time, I would be kicked out. In fact, like when I came out, right, my family didn't talk to me.
Yeah.
Right, they were not interested. Right, some rabbis told my family that they should sit shiva on me.
Yep.
Right. So I knew instinctively as a child that if I shared my heart, shared my feelings, I would be kicked out, right? Although Gary, you went to yeshiva, so you would like this. I don't know if anybody else would like, right? But I remember the moment, I was relatively young when I was in yeshiva, right? And for those of you there, yeshivas are sort of boys with boys and girls with girls. I remember the moment when one of my friends asked the rabbi, why are the girls not with us? And the rabbi said, so that we're not distracted, right? And I remember thinking like, distracted? What do you mean distracted? Distracted from what? Right? It was that one of the moments I'm like, oh shit, like this,
Right.
oh, this is not usual, right?
Right.
Because I thought, right, when I was younger, much younger, that all the boys are with the boys because that's how boys feel towards boys, and that's how girls feel towards girls. But I didn't even conceptualize, right? Right?
You're
That's
too cute, Iggy.
I didn't think that anything was wrong with me. It was much later that I learned that something was wrong with me. But
I want to tell you my story like that because it's different.
right.
When I was in yeshiva in Jerusalem, and at that time, all the girls' seminaries, so the yeshiva, the rabbinical school I was in, was all male.
Right.
All the girls, American girls' seminaries, in their like sexy jean skirts, were all in the same neighborhood. So every time I go to buy a falafel down the street, right. I'd come back and I was like 19. I was like 17, 18. Right. I couldn't focus. So I went to a rabbi. And I said to him, Rabbi, I can't focus on what we're studying because every time I go out on the street, I see these, pretty girls. And like, I want to go talk to them, which I think is a normal desire, And he said, nope, thank God you're normal. And it was such a gift, Yeah. It was such a gift because he normalized right. desire, sexual desire, whatever, connection desire. Like, it was such a gift.
No, for sure. But I wanted to say before the story is sort of that, for Marta, sort of that I think that for me it is part of where the practice of both sort of like Jewish values and definitely mindfulness and sort of other thing is that I have to use my brain. I have to use my intellect, right? To dive deeper into where I find sort of the emotion.
Yeah.
That is right. Sort of that I have to say, okay, if I can't get there naturally, which when I was younger I couldn't, I have to then say to myself, what am I doing each day to feel, right? So if in prayer it says, v'ahavta, and you should love, what does that mean to me, right? If it says, right, you should, right, humble yourself towards God, right, be surrender, which is a big thing in recovery, right, which is, it's funny because I'm recording tomorrow's podcast. We have a podcast, Tattoos and Torah, for people who want to hear. But we're recording the podcast, which is about surrender. It was like, okay, what does that mean? What does that mean to me, right? And I had to use my brain to then find the emotional wheel and be like, okay, this is it.
That's one way. Can I tell you another way that I think is helpful?
Yes.
Two other ways. One is to get in touch with your body. And what that means is start just with the sensations that you feel, like my chest is tight, my stomach's churning, my heart is beating. Like that's, I don't have to get in touch with my body to think like, oh, behind the third rib on the left side is this memory from 7th grade. Like, I just have to start to learn how to pay attention to my body. I used to take some clients to exercise. We either surf or box or work out and do therapy right after because they were in their body. They could connect to, my arms are killing me. I'm tired. Right. But the other way is, and I want to just, if I could use your story about being that little boy, if that's okay.
Of course, absolutely.
It just touched me. I mean, besides the cuteness in the yeshiva, but I just maybe want to find that little boy and give him a hug, like who did at that point realize that he was different.
Oh, it broke everything. It broke everything for me.
Yeah. No, I don't mean to minimize what that did.
No. I'm not saying you are, but like, like it's funny, but like that was the moment that I realized, oh fuck, the world is not meant for me.
Yeah. So what happens when you realize that? And you can't tell your feelings to your family or to the people, your parents, is then you doubt your own feelings often. So you shut them down and then you go into your head. That's the moment, the break right at that moment is when we develop all these coping mechanisms that get us away from that intimacy of ourselves, of just being who we are, because it's not acceptable.
That's right.
And it's a message. And also children developmentally are self-centered, right? Like the world, meaning not bad, but the world revolves around them. And we, as you know, as adults, we hopefully guide them to see more in the world. So when a child learns that they're different, or whether it's, you know, identification or just anything, they're different and they can't tell anybody, the combination of, so first of all, that's shame.
Right.
They internalize, it's not like, oh, my parents, they have their issues and this is, a kid isn't thinking that. A kid says, I'm messed up, I'm bad, something's wrong with me. And then they can't tell people that. That combination of shame and secrecy is a breeding ground for addiction or depression or anxiety. Right. You have to find a way to get out of that pain. Correct. And it's certainly, you know, it's certainly in a case like yours when it was about like sexual orientation, but it could be about, you know, being the tall, lanky, you know,
right, or trauma, or like
having a mole on your head, being, you know, it could having a divorced parents, having a parent who's passed away that has nothing to do with you, but a child doesn't see it that way.
Right. No, absolutely. And I will say, right, for me, and then there's a couple of really cool questions I want to get to, right, is,
and we have to also watch the time.
Yeah, we're about to go into the Q&A, so but that is that is for me the moment, right? One of sort of the major moment where I decided I will outthink them all. I can't be found out, so I will be the smartest, smart-assest. I think that's not a word, but like, right? I will out Tom it. Yeah. Right? And luckily I had the ability, the capacity, the brain capacity to do so. But that's where I hid for a long time.
It's so resilient, Iggy.
Yeah.
It's so and we all, and so many kids do it. We're so smart. Like we figure out a way, whether it's I'll be smarter than, I'll be better than, I'll be the person who makes my parents happy all the time, the perfect student, the perfect daughter, or I'll go hang out in the woods with my friends and get high every day after school. We find a way to feel okay because we have to.
That's right. So, right. So one of the questions, right, in early recovery, this is from Damon Vance. Hello, Damon. In early recovery, it's often said to make decisions which are best for you. At what point in recovery, assuming there is a point, is it recommended to usher in healthy level of compromise? Many times, as we are social animals, we must compromise for overall satisfaction in group settings. That's a cool question. I would say that I think that when you get to ask that question, that means you're ready. But I would say, right? But I would say more importantly is that I think that like everything else, all the time you have to compromise, right? It's like at least in my opinion, recovery can start with small things. It's just like going to the gym. You can't start with lifting like 4 plates. You have to start lifting, right, small plates, and then you get up to. So, right, so find ways that are compromised at the beginning that are smaller stakes. And then by the time you have to, you've already lifted enough, right? You've learned the skills. And I think that's true for recovery, as is true for psychology or anything, right? You have to keep practicing. You can't expect somebody to hand you like a pill or a piece of paper or a text or a psychologist or a rabbi and be like, here, we just sat down for couples therapy. Now we're fixed, right? Now that's the hard work.
Right. I agree. I want to just also, here's a question from Sean about how does this apply to gay men dealing with these needs for vulnerability and connection while carrying so much societal trauma. The thing I said before when I was talking about your story of the secrecy, shame, and then secrecy, there's a great, I didn't make that up. It's by a guy named Alan Downs, who wrote a book called The Velvet Rage about the experience of boys growing up.
Super important.
Yeah. So, but what I think the answer to that is learning how to be true to oneself, right? And to really, you know, the question is unique to gay men, but it applies to other people with other situations. It's learning how to get safe again. Learning to love yourself, learning how to get safe again with your vulnerability. And it's really hard. And then it becomes hard even within the gay male community, right? Like, because they have their own like mean girls and they have their own dynamics and all of that. And so you think you're gonna finally come out and be in this place that is so accepting, and then it's not, or then you don't fit in. And part of it is because some of the dynamics in the gay community, and part of it is if you haven't healed that part of yourself, you can't fit in anywhere.
I will say, and I quote often James Baldwin, right, which has become very popular sort of lately, right, with everything. But right, I quote James Baldwin when he says, "It took me many years of vomiting up all the filth I've been taught about myself and half believed before I was able to walk on earth as though I had the right to be there."
Wow, I love that.
Right, right, sort of like that for me to this day, but I think for everybody, especially for people, also people in recovery, people who've had trauma, all these different things, to decide that I will not accept anybody else's definition of myself other than myself, right? We talk about right, so that I will throw up the filth that I was fed, right? That I'm broken, that something's wrong with me, that right, that sort of recover, that addiction is
Right.
makes me a bad person or have bad things, or right, all these things, right? Because as we said in the beginning, right, every person's want is to be seen and to be heard and to connect, right? So,
That's a
so what
great
we
port.
do is to create a path for them to do so, right? You're
Yeah.
not doomed. Nobody's doomed, right? That's what we're here for, right? Yeah. Um, do you have any suggestions how to help children at an early age to get in better touch with their emotions and feelings, to be more comfortable with themselves? I'll say this, and then Gary, how many times have I seen parents or been myself when a child cries and you say, "Oh, don't cry."
Right. I
Like,
was just gonna say
like, "Oh, I'm sad. Like, I'm sad. Don't be sad."
that.
First of all, they come to you crying and sad, so they're already sad. So what you're saying to them is silly, because like they already are. But more importantly, you've just taught them, right, to disvalidate how they feel. You just basically said to them, the fact that you're angry, the fact that you're sad, the fact you're disappointed is wrong,
Right.
right? And I think we do this with adults as well, right?
It's the Jewish mother that example you gave before, right? Like, no, you don't feel that way.
Right, right. And also like, right, so like people that come from bereavement, right? Like, oh, you have to be strong for blah blah blah, or you're doing right. Like, no, no, the right thing to say, I learned this from Parker Palmer, right? Sort of like
And where?
Parker Palmer.
Oh.
Yeah, right. This is, it sucks. It's right. You have to be there and allow people to have the emotions rather than make them feel that somehow the emotions should be something else.
Right. 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 And so I think that, it doesn't mean though that you have to like give in to everything the kid feels.
That's right.
You have to acknowledge their feeling, but they also need structure and boundaries and limits and healthy ways and autonomy. But yeah, like I think that's the biggest thing, just to acknowledge the kid could be wrong. Kids are wrong, right? How many times does a parent say no every single day? You can say no to your child, you should, but it's acknowledging, oh, I see you're disappointed. I'm sorry about that. Acknowledging their feelings.
And not trying to fix it all, right? And I think that's also true for ourselves, especially now. Yes, it's okay to feel anxiety. Yes, it's okay to feel anger. Yes, it's okay to mourn the life that you didn't have. Yes, it's okay to feel resentments. Yes,
Right.
it's okay to know that you are wearing a mask because you want to help others, but also hate it and resent people because you were that's okay, right? We disvalidate our emotions by trying to make it okay, by other ways, but no. Next questions. Any tips for gay men or other who engage in compulsive behavior when lonely? Then compulsion are intended to be affirming of identity, but actually interfere with connecting with others.
Yeah. It's it. Yeah. Can I say something about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's interesting because it made me think of this book I recently read about pornography. It was written by a gay man, and how pornography. What?
Talking.
Right. How pornography for gay men
Right.
was sometimes the first place that they saw men being sexual with each other. Is the first, even though
That's right.
sex and porn is rarely like sex and life, whether gay or straight doesn't matter, but right. But it was one of the first places for many men who didn't see that as boys, they could see that. And so there's definitely, this question is true for, I think, anyone. Like, how do you avoid engaging in compulsive sexual behaviors when lonely? Because whether gay or straight or whatever, where the person's seeking is, and whether it's sex or relationshipy stuff, right? They're seeking to connect. It's really, in my mind, a low level search for something greater than me to feel okay, which is spirituality. So that's how I see most compulsive sexual behaviors or even addictions, is a search for something to feel okay, to feel greater than me, to feel my whole, to feel all right. But for gay men, there's a particularly unique challenge, right? Like through Grindr and all the other apps and everything else in the culture, unfortunately. And many, but the challenge is going to be the same across the board, in that those compulsive behaviors, although they provide relief temporarily, just like any compulsive behaviors, they don't fill what you're really seeking. So I might find someone to go have sex with for the night or for the rest of for an hour or 5 minutes, but that's not really what I want.
Right.
So it doesn't really fill me up. And so it requires support. I don't think you can do it alone. It requires getting support, creating community around yourself, of people you can talk to, whether professional or just like, friends, that you can say, like, I'm really feeling lonely and I want to just go, have sex with someone. Or I'm really feeling lonely and I want to call an ex. Or I'm really feeling lonely and I want to find the new relationship who's going to fix me, like make me feel better. They're not. Whether it's like I'm going to date them and then I'll be okay, or whether I'm going to like have sex with them and be okay, they're not. I have to deal with that piece inside.
Right.
And you have to do the work on that, and you have to be surrounded by support so you can talk to people about this. And it's really, really scary to talk about this stuff.
Right. So yeah. So yes, you'll have two things I would say. One is, yes, you have to talk about it. It's very difficult, to talk because we feel so much shame and guilt, especially around the sex thing. But also to what you said is that for a lot of people, and I think part of the first work is that somebody will say to you, "Oh my God, you're so hot. Oh my God, you're so sexy." But what you hear is, "You have value. You matter. I love you." Right? Right. This sort of that you have to ask yourself when you do that, what is it that you're looking for? And many times, and by the way, I mean that, sort of gay sex, meth, sort of all that is related, that sort of that you will have the sex, and then are you satisfied? You might be spent, if you will, right? But are you satisfied? And if you're not, that is one of the great telltales of like what it is, right? If it takes you longer to find which porn you like than the actual act you're about to do, right? That tells you that you're not really looking for the sex. You're looking for something else, and that's really difficult. Okay, we've just about a little less than 5 minutes. So thank you for all the questions, everybody. This is cool. We'll try and see. But I would say, I guess just sort of, Gary, how people can find you. What like if people want to talk to you, find you, do more. Where can they find you and all that?
Okay, sure. Well, I'm right here now. No. Center for Intimacy. We're located in New York City, but right now there's the offices are closed. We're online at intimacyrecovery.com. And this is everything that we discussed tonight is what is dealt with, any type of way to avoid being okay with myself, losing myself through addiction, through codependency, any ways that I don't stay true to myself, learning how to get in touch with myself. And we offer individual therapy. We work with couples. We also do a lot of group work, Yeah.
Can you say back slowly, somebody says?
Am I talking too fast?
No, your address. Can you say the address slowly?
It's that yeshiva mumble. Intimacyrecovery.com.
There you go. Cool. And for us, we would write to thank you. We are the Truva Center. We offer online a lot of sort of groups that we do. Primarily, we have a free group called the Truva Group that we deal with a lot of just what we just talked about on Thursdays at 5:30 Eastern time. So if you go to our website under groups, under program and groups, you can find us. It's free and you can join us. We like I said, we have a podcast, Tattoos and Torah, that comes up every Friday. It's on Apple, Spotify, whatever. And we offer sort of studying together and learning and events like this. So everybody who joined us, thank you so much. We'll send an email to everybody sort of like asking for your feedback, but also other programs that you would like for us to do like this together, apart. So feel free to tell us. We're happy, especially now we're on Zoom, to create so many different programs for everybody.
You know what I would love to do, Iggy, if maybe we can talk about it because of the question about how to help kids
Yes.
with this, but also how that impacts us as adults, is maybe do another one specifically about how codependency, or what we call it as adults, but how as children, what impact, how certain things, that experiences we have as children impact us and then carry through as adults.
It's a date, Gary. It's a date. We'll make that happen. Absolutely. So yeah. And again, we're tshuvacenter.org, TSHUVAH.org. You can find us there. Otherwise, again, thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Thank
Gary,
you.
thank you so much. This has been fascinating, and yet another Lego block in our relationship. It's really a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for you.
So me for you as well. So thank you, everybody. We'll talk soon.